Going live. 3, 2, 1, go.
Hi, welcome to Blackbird again. We're going to do our wrap up today on privilege. So, as always, we'll start with some of our house rules. Micah?
Okay, so if you're on our YouTube, you can also join us on the Facebook and ask Megan questions or leave suggestions for what we should talk about or comments or whatever you want. Megan's there and she will talk to you. In
Very lonely. Talk.
in this video, we have some links to some stuff, some articles, and also some other pages that we're going to talk about later. Yeah, we're taking a Christmas break. So we're going to be back in January, and we're reading a book this time. It's called Kindred. It's by Octavia Butler. It's a science fiction like time travel thing. It sounds really cool.
It should be really good. I'm excited to read it.
Yeah, that's basically what we're up to.
All right. Whoop, whoop. All right. So, I'm Megan, as always, your hostess with not the mostest. Just kind of here. And we've got Micah. And Ashley's here with us again, and Elizabeth. So let's dive in. So first, we're going to talk about what we've learned / like a recap of all of the things that we've talked about regarding privilege. And before we get into that, I just want to note, like, there's so much more to all of this. This is just like a brief thing on like the 3 things that we looked at regarding privilege. There are a lot of other things that privilege affect that we didn't dive into here. We'll probably get into later, but for this first segment, this is what we did. So we did healthcare, we did education, and we did the prison system. And we're going to talk about how those 3 things affect the lives of Black people disproportionately than their white counterparts, and what that means for the culture and the community of Black people, and how that equates to privilege for white people because they don't have to deal with those things. So, right. So when we talked about healthcare, we talked about like distrust of healthcare in general because of things like the Tuskegee experiments and other experiments that the government or private agencies have done on people of color without their permission or knowledge. And there was one that I wanted to talk about, and sorry, just backtracking a little bit. There's there was a woman who the government did experiments on and found that she was immune to like a lot of things. And so they took her DNA and they used her DNA to come up with a lot of like vaccines are tested on her DNA, medicines are tested on her DNA, Etta leaks. But her family doesn't get any of the money for that because they just took her DNA and use it to provide a ton of health benefits for all of us. So that was just something I wanted to mention because I forgot to mention it earlier. But you should, Henrietta Leaks, that's her name.
Okay.
So if you haven't heard about her, you should look it up because a lot of the medicines that we use are tested on her DNA for reactions and whatnot. Anyway, so we talked about healthcare and we talked about education and lack of education and lack of access to education and punitive measures that then feed into the justice system, because if you're not in school and you're not getting an education, then what are you doing? You're out in the streets, and then you're exposed to all of these other things that get you that make you what obsessed
Susceptible.
thank you I
Susceptible.
can't say the word right now, I'm sorry. That to being patrolled by police and ending up in jail. So, thoughts on big picture and how this affects culture, and white privilege. Micah, whoever wants to go first, just start talking.
I think it's interesting. Like we looked at these kinds of things in like pieces, right? But to think about the overall picture and how it's hard to get anywhere, much less ahead, right? Like if at school you're like not getting the education that you should be, if you get sick and you can't get well, if you happen to end up in the criminal justice system, like it's game over almost. And even things that we didn't talk about, like the wealth disparity, like you literally just cannot get ahead. So I think big picture wise, it's hard to think about because it's depressing. But I think it all affects each other.
Yeah. Ashley?
Yeah, I mean, basically what Micah said, it just loops and feeds into itself.
Yeah, it's like a negative feedback loop almost.
Yep.
Elizabeth, thoughts?
Um,
Thoughts and prayers?
no.
No.
Oh, what is it? There's some legislation in action. Yeah, I don't know. I've had a really hard time with people who can't understand, like with white people who can't understand that white privilege is a thing. And I've been thinking, like, we haven't talked about it a lot here, but like I've been thinking about like beyond like being white, like whiteness as like a mental state or like a cult or something. Like it's not like people get so offended, and we've talked about that a little bit too. Like they like can't get past the part where they're offended to the part where like they can actually help or even like stop doing things. So
I think it is something it's hard to initially get into. It's like I think the first reaction is like I don't have privilege, right?
Mhm.
Like I can help you. My 2020 has been terrible, and trying to step out of that box kind of is difficult. But once you do, I think you do start to see like moments in your life where things were easier for you, or even just going to the store and buying groceries might be easier for you. So for anyone who's watching, I would encourage you just like think about moments, maybe even just like your day-to-day stuff or like in your own education or your own job, and just like take a moment and think and look.
And that actually like brings like that. So I wanted to make an analogy, and that brings that like what you said brings that out. Because I have a lot of friends. Most of my friends are white, if you haven't guessed, but most of my friends are white. And it's been hard to have these conversations with some of them. As an example, one of my white friends grew up in a trailer park. And so when I say something like, well, you have white privilege, they have this huge negative reaction, which I can understand because a lot of what people think of as privilege is like silver spoon in your mouth. And it's not, that's not the case, right? And so if you're one of those people and you're watching this and you're like, but I don't have privilege. I don't like my life has been hard. I've been to jail or I didn't get a great education and I'm still successful, right? You're sitting here watching this video and you're thinking that, this is a story to help you illustrate or maybe think about how that's different. So she grew up in a trailer park, and the thing that I asked her to think about is, were you forced to live there? Did you not have other options? And she was like, well, we were poor. And I was like, okay, so you were poor, so you were in a trailer park. And that is, yes, in a way, you were forced to live there. Like, but when you got enough money, you could live wherever you wanted, that you could afford. And she's like, yes, we could move. We did move where we wanted to when we had enough money. I was like, okay, so then you have to think about a Black family who is growing up in a ghetto or the projects or or whatever you want to call it, low income housing, and they get enough money to move out of low income housing, but they can't move into predominantly white neighborhoods. And I know some of you are thinking, but that's not a thing anymore. Like, no, it's not a thing anymore, but it has lasting effects. If they could have bought a house that had money and the neighborhood stayed nice, then they would have more wealth now. But they weren't allowed to live there. And then when they did move in, the house depreciated, right? And then more people of color moved in, and then suddenly the nice houses and the nice neighborhood weren't worth as much, so they weren't able to accrue that money. So when we're talking about privilege, we're not talking you had a super easy life. What we're saying and what privilege is that your life wasn't hard because of the color of your skin. And that's what white privilege is. Like, yes, people have hard lives. For people of color, a lot of that is because they are people of color. Yes?
Yeah.
Is that what we've all that's the takeaway from this?
It's like playing a game without all the pieces, or like on super hard mode. Like not only do you have like normal human problems like poverty or education, but on top of that, society is literally trying to keep you down. And like doesn't want you to advance, doesn't want you to like accrue wealth to pass on to generations. Like it's like playing with the rules are different, essentially.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, that's the thing about that is like I like the one time ever I got into it with somebody on Facebook, was this woman was saying, like, she's like, well, systems are people. Systems are just people. So if you don't like the way the system works, like, she refuses to believe that there's a systemic problem because the system is just people. And so if you don't like the way it's working out, you just, vote different or whatever.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, but I mean, she's also somebody who believes that because redlining was like, they stopped redlining in the 60s, like it's no longer a problem. So I feel like we're not living in the same reality anyway, but that's the thing is like, yeah, this system is people. And I'm sure most people on a personal level like think that they are being good people and like not contributing to this as a problem because they're good people. And that, I mean, that's the issue is like you can be a good person and think you're doing the right stuff and still be contributing to a systemic issue.
Like for people who don't believe in privilege or don't see their privilege, I would also like encourage you to learn some history. That has been my favorite part of this project as a whole, because then you start to see like why things are the way they are. Mm-hmm. And I also think white people think this problem has been solved after like civil rights era, that it's no longer an issue. And I think if you follow the history and then you see how it connects like what's happening today, it's very clear that some things have gotten better, yes, but some things are still pretty terrible.
Yeah.
So learning history, I think, is key, at least for me.
I think I think it's a big part of it. And like even as a person of color, there are things like that since we started, but especially with privilege, that I am more aware of, or that like I look at some of my situations differently. And not to say like I think there is this myth or this ethos, like this culture or whatever of educated black people pulling the black card. Well, like, oh well, it's da 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 because I'm black. And not to say that that doesn't happen. I went to a school with a guy like that. You drove me fucking crazy. But when, like, for me, when I look back at certain things, it does like, oh, like that was fucked up. Like I didn't fully realize at the time, but now that I know more, I realize like you did that because I'm black. you know. So I think history is a huge key.
It's fine.
It's fine. A huge part of learning about privilege and how you can make things right or do better as a person. So nice segue. Let's get into that. So what have you guys found or seen, or what has worked for you as far as addressing your, yeah, let's do that. Micah, like what has worked for you as far as addressing your privilege?
I think at this point, I've only taken like the baby step of recognizing, and I don't know if appreciating is the right word, but I guess being aware of like, I got here like in life and in like my career for certain reasons. I got hired for certain reasons, or I went to a certain school for certain reasons. And I think that one's been interesting, especially career-wise, because it is kind of a manual labor job, and I feel like that's sort of a bootstraps job. Like you get yourself, like I worked really hard, back and looking back and being like, well, maybe that wasn't always the case. Like maybe they wanted to hire the white girl, or
Well,
I got my education.
do you think about that? Because like the theater is predominantly white.
Yeah.
So I mean, I guess now like that you're like kind of looking at it, do you see that? Do you realize that? Does that like
Yeah, I don't think I can pick specific points or anything like that, but it does, in the past couple of years, you kind of look around and be like, why are there so many white people in this room working on this one thing? Or like thinking about past productions and being like, that entire cast was white and I didn't have to be that way. Like, it wasn't like a white show or something. So I think like for me, it's just been baby steps of like looking at where I am in life and then looking like around at work and being like, huh.
Elizabeth? I guess like just like the same question. Like what have you seen? What steps are you personally taking? Or have
So
you learned or
Yeah, I'm also kind of like baby stepping it, which is real dumb because I feel like the two of us have been talking about this for like a couple of years now. And that's kind of a thing. Is like the first step is understanding that it's real and that I benefit, but I haven't really known, and I still am not like, I don't know what to do other than to like call people out when I realize that they're, wrong. And at the same time, like I like haven't been working for a couple of years, and also like we're all locked down. I'm not seeing people, so it's like it hasn't come up. I'm ready for it to come up. Like somebody say something fucked up. I really, I did. I mean, when we had that whole long thing on my Facebook, like I did take the time to like really like address, like she would post comments and like I'd really like address it like diplomatically, try and have a really thoughtful response, because I was really hoping to like get her to understand, like at least get her like closer, especially because her son was also posting a bunch of Black Lives Matter stuff. So I was like, surely like if I can explain this in a way that's like I said a lot of like we instead of you. It was like trying to be so diplomatic. Maybe she'll start to kind of get it. And she's fully entrenched. Like she had the same response to my like long thoughtful answers as everybody else who was like shorter stuff. I was like, oh, she's not listening. And that is that's my big problem. It's like I don't Like, you have to find the people who want to learn stuff anyway. And it's really great to talk to people who already get it, but it doesn't really help anything. Like, it's nice to realize, like, oh, I'm not crazy. Like, I'm not the only person, but I don't think it's getting anything done. One thing I guess I'm hopefully doing that's helpful is, like, I am voting in every election and every primary. I have been doing that since 2016. Weird. I don't know what triggered that in 2016, but like, yeah. So I'm hoping that my voting is helping. I'm hoping if we ever get back, like, that I will actually have the balls to address anything shitty I hear. It's harder on Facebook too, because, like, it's not the same as having a conversation with a person.
Yeah.
And like we were just talking, it's like I haven't been keeping up, but I've followed a couple of Instagram accounts, which sounds so shallow, but there are a couple that have been really helpful, made some really good points, and given me some things to think about, because I know. I guess what it is like, until recently, it felt like it was a huge step to realize you even have white privilege. Like, so I was like, well, I'm like light years ahead of everybody else. And then it's like, oh yeah, that's really not enough. Like, great. You're like a few steps ahead of everybody, but like, that's not really, you're not there yet.
Step to take, and it is a hard step to take, I think. So, like, you're short selling yourself.
Well, I'm really good at undercutting, like, my own experiences. I'm really good at being like, oh, I was wrong. I was super wrong, like, right away. So,
Yeah. If this were a 12-step program, the first step is the hardest.
Hey.
That's what we should do.
Might be onto something, yeah.
Ashley, for you, like, I mean, as a person of color, but as someone who I think also, I don't know, I feel like you have predominantly white friends. Do you make an effort to have these conversations with them, or?
I mean, no, because
No.
I don't have to. Like, it's one of those things, like, I am friends with people that I guess would already have those views, so I wouldn't put myself in a position to need to have those. Because I mean, that's just me. Like, the people, like, and I would say my friends group is pretty diverse. Like, I would say probably high school and college, it was predominantly white because that's where I was. But then, like, I have a lot of Black friends, I have Hispanic friends, I have Asian friends, I have, like, all kinds of friends. But I think the common thread of me being friends with someone is that we share kind of a common respect for each other. So, like, they're gonna respect me, and I know that right off the bat, and I'm gonna respect them, and they know that right off the bat, and that's how we step into the relationship as friends. Because if there's not the mutual respect, then we are not friends. So
Yeah.
I think that's something that I don't encounter, just because I don't put myself in that position to be in contact with people who are not gonna value me.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And very healthy.
Oh, it's super healthy. It's been fantastic for my mental health. Like, just right off the bat, just weed them out. And it's like, if I don't have to talk to you, like nothing says I have to talk to you. So if we're just not going to be friends, then I don't have to be friends with you.
I think that's a good, like, leading point, but it's like, so I think there's been a lot of, on my Facebook, and like part of the reason we started this is so that I personally could have a space to have these conversations. I still post shit on my Facebook because I'm Black and it's what I do. And also it's just me and it's what I do. So if you know me at all, there's gonna be a point where I'm like, so that's part of the reason you started Blackbird 1619, because I do have a lot of friends who come from different background than me. And because I was a member of a fraternal organization, I'm not gonna throw them under the bus and name them personally. But I was a member of an organization that was predominantly white, and a lot of my friends from that organization are white and conservative. Um, and so it sort of started from having conversations with them and um, not being heard, not being listened to, and then being attacked. So, uh, but I think a huge part of this for me is that I know they're good people, right? Like, I know that they're good people, and I know that a lot of them have worked very hard to get where they are. Um, but and at the same time, it doesn't mean they don't have privilege. And I'm trying to create, and in these videos, a knowledge and an acceptance of like this is what happened and this is where we are, and it does affect me as a person of color and you as a white person. Um, so I think for me, that's where a lot of this is coming from. And like I said, I'm learning. Like from all of this research, I am better able to communicate with people that don't get it. Right? I'm able to like point out like, well, this happened and this happened and this is how we got here. Before I think I was just sort of like screaming in the night, like, and now I have tools to like this is why it's this way, and this is how it happened. And I think that's an important part of friendship. It's like I said, I know those people care about me and that they love me. um, but we definitely have seen a shift in our friendship, as it were. um, so let's get into how do we how do we move forward? Let's say we've acknowledged our privilege.
I think that leads really well into listening to your Black friends and like actually listening to your Black friends when they tell you about like a crazy encounter with the police or their boss who did something racist. And you don't have to do that much more if you don't want to. Like really, just listening does help, and not the kind of listening where you're waiting for them to stop talking so you can tell them your crazy story about the police or whatever. Um, but I think a lot of Black people, like Megan's sort of saying, is that they'll say things and white people are like, like that's not a thing, or you're blowing it out of proportion, or whatever. I think if you're a woman, this probably sounds really fucking familiar because it happens a lot as well. So I think listening is can really help.
Yes, I think of the things you can do, listening, like really listening, not just waiting for your turn to talk, is a big thing. Um, 'Cause yeah.
It also will like if you are listening to your friends, then you are going to be more open and more aware, like when you're in at work or in a public space, and like starting to see these encounters, and like it helps that you believe and that you're aware, and like at that point you can probably, if you feel comfortable, speak up. And it can be as simple as like, hey, that's messed up, or you know someone explain to me what's going on here because it doesn't feel right.
And like someone asked me a question when I opened up my Facebook, and it was like, how do I support my Black friend when they're in this moment? And my response was, it depends on your comfort level, right? Some people are ready to be in your face, and that's fucked up, and some people aren't. And like pick where you're comfortable with. Sometimes it's enough to just be there. And like from things that I've read and things that I've seen, it's sometimes it's enough for, an advocate when like someone is being attacked for someone to just come up and stand next to them and hold their hand or put their hand on their shoulder or ask them if they're okay. And a lot of people who are doing the wrong thing, I'm not saying all people because there are crazy people out there, but there are people who will back off like when they see that someone else is standing there and has their back. And it doesn't take much. You don't have to say anything to have sometimes in situations to have someone's back. Just being there, right? Just standing next to someone while they're being verbally abused sometimes is enough to make someone back off.
Mhm.
Also, kind of piggybacking off of that, like I was talking about the book that I started. She talks specifically about the person who was filming her in the Whole Foods and how she was specifically asking not to be filmed.
Yeah.
And he continued to film her, pushing and saying, "Oh, but you could want this for later." And she still persistently asked him not to film what was going on. And so listening, just circling back to the listening, like just because you think you know what is the right thing to do, if you literally, I mean, and this is in human interactions, period, just take 2 seconds and listen to what the person is telling you. Listen to how, like, look at their body language. Like, don't just fly into superhero mode. Like,
Yeah.
you don't, like, it, that's not always the answer. Just listen and ask questions and don't just assume. Because if you're literally just going to not like cast what they're saying aside anyway, then are you really an advocate? Are you really doing anything to help the situation?
Yeah. That's a good point. And it's in one of the articles that we listed below. Well, it's not in the article, but it's in one of the comments. And it's that like it's a relationship of power and um you have to if you're viewing being an advocate as a gift, right? I'm gifting you with my advocacy, then you're not giving up your power. You're just, it's just like
You're still not equals. You're
you're
always
still
putting
not equal.
yourself
Yes.
higher up because you're saving the person. Like, you are
Yeah.
more than, so you can aid in this because you are more than.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, and I think that's a really important distinction to make. If you're going to be an ally, if you're going to help, the way to truly do that is not from a gift standpoint. Like I'm not your superhero. I'm not coming in to save you. I'm I'm behind you and I'm ready to support you. Like that's how you're an advocate, right? Not I'm in front of you and I'm speaking for you and I'm telling them how they're wrong. I'm behind you and I'm listening and I'm here with you. Like that's how you advocate and that's how you support and that's how you're an ally, right?
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it as well. It's really clear.
So other ways.
Can we do the noodle brain, which is like the worst name for something?
The what?
The noodle brain. So the idea is you're at work and your coworker tells a racist joke, and you pretend that you're an idiot and you don't understand, and you have them explain the joke to you. Because what's going to happen is that person will realize somewhere through explaining it that it's a racist joke and they should not be telling it.
Like at some point they're going to have to be like, it's funny because black people are dumb, or it's funny 'cause black people are lazy, and they're like, do you realize what you just said?
And so, like, the people who are smart and maybe not actually racist, but for some reason tell racist jokes, are probably going to get not even that far into an explanation and stop telling those jokes around you. And then, like, if it is an actual racist person, maybe they'll just stop telling jokes around you, which is also fun. But I think it's a really good tactic. Just play really, like, dumb. You don't know what they're talking about.
Why is that funny?
Yeah, is that
I
funny?
don't get it. Well, And I think it's true for like most jokes. Like any joke you have to explain is automatically not funny anymore.
I don't think I've ever had anybody tell me a racist joke, like without. Well, no, obviously I've heard racist jokes, but like but like at work, never a joke. But like in my adult life, I've heard plenty of comments and like not known how to address it. It's always somebody that like ranks higher than me and was like, oh, well, I just like I don't like that's one of the things about privilege too is like you can just wait for the uncomfortable feeling to go away. Like that's and in that little bubble of your workplace, it doesn't really. I mean, I do this thing where I'm like, I may not say anything, but I log it and I remember. I'm like, I know what you're like. Like, I may not, and I'm only sad that I made the decision to start calling people out after I stopped working because that's real convenient. But yeah, there's been so much stuff that like I didn't even know how to address it because I knew this was somebody that like would get defensive immediately if I said anything. And she was my direct supervisor, so I was also like, I need my
job.
Yeah, and I doubt that she would have fired me, but it just would have like. But that's the thing. It's like it would have been uncomfortable, and at this point now, I'm like, well, yeah, that would have been fine. Like I'm so mad. I never. It's been really interesting though, because like we're not Facebook friends, but her daughter's Facebook friends with me, and she like ever since like I started posting things that weren't just pictures of my kids on Facebook. I have not heard from my old boss in like months, and I was like, she may have deduced that I didn't, or just, I mean, that's it. It's like I don't think she thought that was the other thing. It's like I think it was just like I don't think she thinks she's a racist. I think if I said that, her feelings would be really hurt. Like she'd get real defensive, but also she would just be like, what could I have said? But like,
I think that's where like the situation you're talking about, I think like Micah was saying, that's where noodle brain like really comes. Like you're not really saying anything, right?
Yeah.
You're not like I'm not telling you like that was racist.
Yeah,
I'm just like I don't understand what you're saying. Can you explain it to me?
Yeah.
In the words of Denzel Washington, explain it to me like I'm 5. Explain to me what you just said like I'm a 5-year-old. And
Yeah, explain exactly like why are you so upset the police didn't come help you as a white woman in Oak Cliff for a long time? Why would that be worse because you're white? Like what? Damn it! It missed an excellent opportunity.
That goes back to like what you're comfortable with too.
Yeah. That's
absolutely.
something too. I've grown up a little bit since then.
And I think it's hard at jobs, especially if it's like your direct supervisor or any of your bosses, to say it because you don't want to lose your job, and that is hard.
Well, and beyond that too, it's like you can, I think, get a little more confrontational. I was trying to look for like racism interrupters, which is like there's some phrases that you can like have in your pocket for when like if you're not sure what to say, like you can at least memorize some things that you can say. And it's real basic. Like that's just not okay.
Yeah.
Or like that is offensive. That's enough to at least start a conversation. But
Yeah, and I think that's true. There's something like very easy and simple to like. I don't like that.
yeah. And then they get to ignore you.
Bonus. Okay. I'm not encouraging anyone losing friends. I will say that we're all human beings and we're all growing, and it's a growth process. And if you have a friend or a family member or a Facebook acquaintance who cannot appreciate that you're growing as a human being, you may need to reevaluate your friendship. because we're all growing all the time. Someone recently told me that I was not the person that they met 10 years ago or whatever. I don't remember. And in my head, and not just from a race point of view, but in my head, I was like, no shit, I'm not the person you met 10 years ago. If I was still that girl, I would be a horrible mother. I would be the worst mom on the planet if I were still that person. There's no way I can still be Megan from 10 years ago. I have 2 kids and a husband now. Like, it's about growing. It's about growth. And it's, again, like another one of my isms. Like, when you know better, you do better, right? When you're growing as a person, you make adjustments. It doesn't mean admitting that you were wrong in the past because you've learned something new doesn't make you a bad person. It makes you a person who is growing and becoming a better person. And that's nothing to be ashamed of. If your viewpoints never change, then
That's-
you're not growing and you're stagnant. And that's where fungus grows. Fungus? Gross.
I think that's a good lead into unconscious biases.
Yeah.
So like the things that you think and maybe don't say out loud about other people of different races, and recognizing that and changing your thinking can be really powerful. I'm hoping that in 2021 we will do a video about unconscious biases because it's super fascinating. Everyone does it. Everyone has it. Doesn't mean you're a bad person. But if you start working on like little things like that and changing your thinking, you can change. You can grow. You can be in 10 years.
Get in your cocoon and become a beautiful butterfly. Yeah, I think that's really important. I know. Oh, like Ashley's on mute over there, but I feel like she's having children issues, and that's why. Fair enough. But yeah, I think that is a really good point. Is that it's about changing and growing, and that's what we're about here. And I just want to reiterate that we're not. This is not like bashing white people or making you feel bad, or like that's not my goal. I don't think anyone here has the goal of like making you feel bad and bashing you. It's about educating and helping you transform into a better person. If you don't want to do that, that's fine. If you watch our videos and you're like, these people are full of shit and this is bullshit, whatever. That's you, man. Do what you do. If you're interested in growing, then I hope that you're getting that from this. And that it's helping you to educate and learn and then put some of these things into practice that you're hearing us talk about. So like we were talking about workplace a little bit, and, Micah's workplace, and I'm a stay-at-home mom now, but the most diverse workplace that I ever worked at was when I worked at the dental clinic that was for the LGBT community and the AIDS community. That's the most, and not even like diverse is the wrong word. That was the only place that I've worked that was predominantly Black. So we had 2 doctors and 3 assistants, a hygienist, and a front desk person. So there were 7 of us. One of the doctors was Black. The front desk person was Black. 2 of the assistants were Black. The other assistant was Hispanic, and the other doctor was Hispanic, and the hygienist was white. So it was very interesting because I'd never been in a predominantly minority workplace. We only had one person who was white in our office. And I was there when sort of Black Lives Matter kicked off and talking about that. And so there were just a lot of discussions that happened in that office that were good discussions about, how we were feeling. And I like for our hygienist, she was so amazing. Just as a person, just a very amazing person because she did those things. She listened. She didn't get upset. She didn't get angry. She listened to our stories. She expressed empathy. She, she like there was a time she sent me a text message and she was like, "I'm so sorry. Like I can't understand how scary it is for you to be raising a biracial son and how hard that it's going to potentially be for him." And she was amazing. Oh my god. So, and I'm not advocating for minorities taking over people's jobs. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying it was in that aspect, was a very healthy environment for me as a person of color. Um, I've worked in other jobs where I've been the only Black person there. And things weren't said, but things were said about, that I was the only Black person there. I had a coworker get angry at me because I made more money than her. Um, and she was white. And yeah, she had learned a lot, but I had a degree and I did way more there than she did. But she was angry that I made more money than her. Um, so there are things like that. And you can, I think, as an employee, if you're allowed to give input, because at that workplace, I learned enough and I was trusted as an employee enough to be allowed to give input when it came to hiring my replacement. And that was something that I focused on, like credentials and what do you know how to do, and like not looking at names and who's applying, and just like give me the people who I don't have to train for a year, right? Because it's a dental field. But I think as employees, there is some strength in that also. As a hiring person, absolutely, as a boss. But let's talk about how you can advocate for diversity in your workplace.
At the company I'm working at right now, there's a whole EDI committee and movement. So it's equity, diversity, and inclusion. So like participating in those, especially now that like we're all working from home. Oh no, where'd she go? Has been
Sorry, I don't know what's going on with I'm still here. Just keep talking.
Participating in that has been really interesting, and there's a lot of like learning going on. And I don't influence hiring so much, but I think there are moments you can find to push for certain people, and you can take those moments to be like, I really like this kid that we work with. I think he'd be amazing. I don't care that he's not white. Like, let's hire this guy. But that it can be really tricky at work because you don't want to lose your job. So there's like that line, I think.
I have personally been in hiring positions for probably most of the last 10 years, I would say. I've been in the workforce. Like, I've been the hiring manager, I've been the assistant general manager, I've been the general manager. So I've been the person who made kind of those hire fire decisions. And I hired based on credentials. I hired based on what you bring to the table. Like, as any good boss would, how are you going to make my life easier? And that's would be it. Like, if you're Black, white, Mexican, it doesn't matter. Like, I always did try to make my teams as diverse as possible, because I feel like definitely diversity in staff is great when you're looking at kind of people shopping in your store, like getting whatever product you have, because I feel like you should try your best to have someone that's relatable to everyone kind of represented in a team, and that makes a really strong team, because especially if you're talking about sensitivity training and that sort of things, like if you have a really just a spread of one grouping of people on a team, like they may not understand maybe why it wasn't the best idea to say whatever someone said. But I feel like if you have that more diversity, then you can have those higher conversations about kind of the right things to say and the wrong things to say, and how it makes them feel, because they are represented. I mean, and this goes for, I mean, gay, straight, lesbian, like even beyond race, I feel like. So
Yeah.
just keeping it diverse. I always try to get it as absolutely diverse as possible.
One of the conversations my company had early on, somebody made a comment of like, if you are in the room with the same kind of people, so like the same background, same education, like you're going to come up with the same solutions over and over again. So his point was like, the more diverse the team, the better the solutions, the more options. And I was like, that like really hit me hard. I was like, duh, that's totally like you're coming up with new stuff, and it's what we're going for.
Yeah, because it's stuff you wouldn't necessarily have thought about. And if everybody's the same, then you, of course, you wouldn't think about it, because that's not your experience. That's not your background.
Yeah. Sorry, I don't know what was going on with my computer. I'm back. Sorry. So I was like, in adding to that, like, if you're not a person in a hiring position, right? There's still things you can do. Like, if you work in a field, you know, and you have a position open up at your office, you know, like encouraging your friends who are of color, like, hey, like, we've got this position open, I think you're qualified for it, you should apply. And then having, you know, someone who's in as a reference is always a plus, no matter what it is, right? That's my brother has a felony charge. And my husband works for a company, and all he did was put him as a reference. And my brother got the job, and he's doing really well. And they don't normally hire people with felonies. But my husband already was a manager in the company, and my brother got the job. So that's something to think about, you know, when you're talking about diversity in your workplace. If you have a person of color who you feel is qualified, I'm not saying just tell all your friends, you know, like, if they're qualified for the position, encourage them to apply. As I feel like it's like a lot of things. It's like once there's um, once there's one once there's one person of color, then it grows, right? Like, it grows from there, and it's not a bad thing, because it's like one person, if they're doing their job properly. I'm not advocating for people who don't do their fucking job. That shit drives me crazy. But if you have someone who's there and who's working hard and who's doing their jobs, then it opens the door for other people of color to come in and do their job. It's like Ashley was saying, because you're providing different experiences and different ideas and different knowledge, because you don't come from the same background. It's good for problem solving, right? Sorry, did I interrupt with Ashley saying more? Did I miss? I'm sorry.
Would you like to go into the giving season? 'Tis the season.
'Tis the season. Christmas and Hanukkah and Kwanzaa and probably a lot of other. Sorry, I'm not super well versed. I just know those things. Maybe there's probably There's probably several other holidays that I'm forgetting. I'm sorry. Yule. Maybe you celebrate Yule.
Festivus.
A good season. Back to your community. So we've come up with a short list that's going to be there's going to be links to donate to different organizations. And I think, Ashley, if you want to tell us about Okra, sorry.
The Okra Project.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Can we
so
just do that,
basically
one more time?
the Okra Project.
Okra with a K.
Like the food. OKRA. Yeah.
I just want to make it really because I don't want people to be like, oh, Oprah, yeah.
No, the Okra Project. And they're the Okra Project across all social media. It's the okraproject.com. But basically what they are is they're based out of New York, and they were established in January of 2018. And I'm just going to read from my little notes here. But they provide free, fresh, home-cooked, healthy, culturally appropriate meals to Black, trans, non-binary, and non-gender conforming people experiencing food insecurity. Also, they just, with kind of everything with COVID going on, they cannot really do that anymore because kind of persons in people's homes. So now it's more like donations go to getting groceries and getting food delivered to these same people who would be at risk. But then they also started something in October that is called the Nina and Tony McDade Mental Health Recovery Funds Program. And that will basically provide a one-time free therapy session to kind of cover things to that same group, the trans, non-binary, non-gender conforming. What I thought was really cool was that the chef who would go to your home was also Black and trans. And it seems like they want to expand. And it seems like they've done a really good job with that, and it's kind of been slowed down, and they've had to come up with other things like this mental health recovery foundation or fund rather. And basically you just go to the website if you fit that bill, if you are Black and trans and non-binary or non-gender conforming, and you can just enter your information, and it's almost like a little tiny micro grant because I mean, what's $100 worth of groceries? Like that literally, like I think I used to spend $100 on groceries when I was single and in my 20s. It can go a long way, and it is a game changer for some people that they either would not eat or wouldn't have the quality of food based on where they live and kind of their current income restrictions.
Yeah, that's a really good one. So not a donation site, but if there's one near you, you just in like the same vein of supporting trans and making or helping to make that more normal for some people. A lot of cities are doing drag story time.
Oh yeah.
And the drag queen will come to your library and read a kid's book and be fabulous. So if there's one in your neighborhood, that's a really good way to support. Because the more people that go, then the program continues. And just a thought, like it's fun. We went to one. It's fun. It's so fun. My kids loved it.
One of Elizabeth's was the Southern Poverty Law Center, which I actually know nothing about. I don't know if you want to give us a little info.
It's been a long time since I found them. Let me see. Let me pull them back up. I know that let's see.
On their website, they say they're working in partnership with communities to dismantle white supremacy, strengthen intersectional movements, and advance the human rights of all people. And I think it's it's in the South specifically, right?
Yes, what I remember, because I remember, yeah, it was several years ago, and I was like, this is where I want to put my money. I seem to recall that it was like they provide legal help for people who can't afford it in the southern states specifically. I can't remember who it was. It's like some hate group has labeled them a hate group, which I love. So
If a hate group doesn't like you, you're doing great.
yeah.
I put, in the description, I have a link for the Texas ACLU. So if you don't know what the ACLU is, I don't know how to help you, but there's one specifically for Texas that you can donate to.
Yes. In all states, if you're watching us from another state, I think there's one for every state.
Yeah, or you can donate to like there's also the NAACP Lawyers Defense Fund, which got more notice over the summer.
Yeah.
And for Dallas specific, there's the Mothers Against Police Brutality. It was started by a mom in Dallas whose son was killed by the police. They describe themselves as a voice for justice of victims of police brutality and deadly force. We are a multiracial, multi-ethnic coalition uniting mothers nationwide to fight for civil rights, police accountability, and police reform. So I picked that one because it's in Dallas, and with the police currently losing their goddamn minds.
So important. And just on that note, we briefly talked about like in the vein of things you can do, and also like, so sorry, point one. My brain is like, it's drifting. It's getting late. But point one, a good thing about donating is it's Christmas. And I know there are a ton of you out there who don't need more shit. And you have family who don't need more shit. So donating in someone's name to a cause, and then just like make a nice little card. Some of them will like send you a gift because it's the season, and they'll send you a little gift, or they'll send you a note saying thank you, and just pass that on to the person that you donated in the name of. And that's Christmas, because I think we can all agree that yes, there are some things that we absolutely need, but there's a lot of shit that we don't. No one needs another towel. No one needs another cup. No pairs of socks, underpants, whatever it is you get that family member that you don't know what to get for them. Like, they probably don't need another one of those.
I think it might be great, like if you have a racist or homophobic uncle that you just don't know what to give. That might be a good one.
And I just, hey, I did this for you. Out of love.
You're welcome.
So I don't remember what my second point was because it's gone now. But there was one. I'm sure it'll pop up in another video. I think we kind of covered everything. We are, like Micah was saying, at the top of the show. We're reading a book. So Octavia Butler she's very renowned in like the science fiction world. She's got like I have several friends who absolutely love her, and I've never read anything from her. But we're reading a book by her, and we'll discuss it when we get back after the holiday season, and hopefully some of the craziness dies down. We'll see. But it's a new year. Let's be positive. A new year, a new you can make a resolution to be anti-racist and advocate. But we're reading a book, and I think so. The first book that we read was a biography. I think sometimes science fiction can have a very powerful influence on reality. I think a lot of people now like, oh, it's 1984. Thanks, Big Brother, and da 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 da, because we're living through that. Um, and so I think science fiction is a really good tool and a good way to put social situations in a way that's more palatable when you see it because it's fiction. You're like, oh, it's not real life. And then you like start reading it and you're like, oh, it's kind of like real life. how did they solve it? Maybe I can learn something from this book. So we're reading Octavia Butler, and I'm really excited to read it. And it is called
Kindred.
Kindred. I don't I keep wanting to call it kindness, and I don't know why. I think it's just K words.
It was published in 1979. It is still very popular. I am unable to get a copy from the library. I'm gonna have to buy it, which is fine.
So yeah, you're probably gonna have to buy it or download it, or I think you might be able to rent it from Amazon. Like there are still sites that like rent books if you need it.
Maybe like a half-price book situation or a local bookstore.
You
Yeah.
might be able to find it at a local bookstore. Hey, if shop local. If you can get it at a local bookstore, do it. Hey, and books are great gifts. So if you're like, hey, I'm reading this book and I'm gonna get it for you, and then maybe you could check out Blackbird 1619 because they told you to read this book, and there's a lot of cool stuff that they talk about on their page. Maybe. Shameless self-promotion. But I'm really excited to read it. I hope you all out there, I guess we're wrapping up. So I hope everyone has wonderful holidays. Do what you can. Show people you love, you care. Listen and do the right thing. Anybody else wrapping up statements, arguments, by 2020 statements?
Yeah. Nope.
Nope. Nope. Nah. Not even see you later, dumpster fire.
Oh, it'll be the new dumpster fire next year, but
Yeah.
maybe a little smaller.
Yeah, it's not
Maybe.
Maybe there will be a fire extinguisher nearby.
One of those rolling hand-pushed
Yeah.
trash cans, not a whole dumpster.
Yeah. Something you can easily pick up and put out. Fingers crossed. All right. So I hope you've learned a lot tuning in to us this 2020 year, despite the chaos and the craziness and the COVID and the election and all of the things that have made 2020 hard. I hope that we've educated you and given you hope and given you reasons to fight on. Yeah, so that's all we got for you. See you later, 2020. Don't be a racist. Wash your fucking hands.